I used to think that being the responsible one was something to be proud of. I was wrong. It just means you become the person everyone expects to absorb the damage. My younger sister stole $60,000 from me. Not all at once. Not in a way that was easy to prove. But slowly, over 3 years. Through loans that were never going to be repaid. Through borrowed money for emergencies that were never quite real. Through a business venture my parents pushed me to invest in, because she needed a fresh start. By the time I understood what had happened, the money was gone. My sister had a new car. And a renovated basement suite, and my parents were sitting across from me at the kitchen table telling me that family doesn't keep score. I was 31 years old. I had just gotten married. My wife and I had been saving for a house for 4 years. That $60,000 was most of it. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I had a sister. I'll call her that throughout. Just my sister, who had learned something very early in life. She had learned that consequences were optional. And my parents had spent 25 years teaching her that. I want to be honest about something before I go further. I was not a saint. I was not endlessly patient. I was not a perfect brother. And I did not handle everything gracefully. There were nights I said things I regret. But I want to tell this story truthfully. Because I spent a long time telling a softer version of it. The version where I was understanding. And my parents were just trying their best, and my sister was going through a hard time. That version made everyone more comfortable. It also was not true. My sister is 3 years younger than me. Growing up in Mississauga, she was the one who got the benefit of the doubt. Not because she was malicious about it. She was charming, genuinely funny, the kind of person who made friends easily and lit up a room without trying. But she also lied easily. She borrowed and forgot easily. She apologized well and changed nothing. When she was 16, she rear-ended a car in a parking lot and drove away. My parents found out, because the other driver had gotten her plate number. My parents paid the damage out of pocket to avoid her insurance going up. They told her to be more careful. That was it. No consequences, no repayment plan, nothing. When I was 19, I borrowed my dad's car without asking and got a parking ticket. I paid it back out of my own money within a week, and my dad still brought it up for 3 years afterward. I noticed that difference. I think most older siblings notice that difference. You tell yourself it's not a competition. It's not about fairness. You're older, so you're held to a higher standard. You find ways to make the imbalance feel logical because the alternative, that your parents simply love you differently, is too painful to look at directly. So, you do what I did. You become the reliable one. You move away for university, you come home for holidays, you help when asked, you don't make scenes. You become the one they brag about to their friends. He's very steady, very grounded, very responsible. And you swallow the small resentments because you've told yourself they're small. My wife, I'll call her that, saw it clearly from the beginning. She grew up in Hamilton. She had 2 brothers who were both treated roughly the same. And when she met my family for the first time, she was gracious and warm. But on the drive home she said something that stuck with me. She said, "Your parents love you. But I don't think they respect you the same way they respect her feelings." I defended my parents immediately. I said she was misreading it. She nodded and didn't push. She was right. We got married in September. Small wedding, about 60 guests, a venue just outside the city that we'd saved for. My sister was the maid of honor. She gave a speech that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. She hugged me at the end and whispered that she was proud of me. I believed her. I still think she meant it. In whatever way she was capable of meaning things. 3 weeks after the wedding, she called me with the first emergency. Her landlord had raised her rent without proper notice, she said. She was disputing it. But in the meantime, she was short for the month and could she borrow $1,000? Just until things settled. She said she'd pay it back by the end of the following month. I didn't even pause, I transferred it that night. The end of the following month came and went. She texted to say she was still sorting it out with the landlord, and could I give her until the month after. I said sure. That month passed too. I asked again gently. She said she was under a lot of stress, and it was hard to talk about money right now. I backed off. I don't know exactly when I stopped expecting the money back. It happened gradually the way most slow losses do. You just stop counting. The second emergency came 4 months later. Her car had broken down, and she needed a repair or she'd lose her job. I didn't own a car at the time. My wife and I were still using transit and the occasional rental, so I couldn't lend her mine. My parents suggested I help her out financially. They framed it carefully. They said she was really trying this time, she'd taken on more hours at work, she just needed a small bridge. They said I was in a better position than they were right now. I gave her $2,500. I want to be clear about why I kept giving. It wasn't naivete, or not entirely. It was this. I had grown up watching my parents bail her out, and I had absorbed the belief that that was what you did in a family. You didn't let someone struggle if you had the means to help. Saying no felt like a betrayal of something fundamental. Even when yes was slowly bankrupting me. My wife and I talked about it. She was careful not to be critical, because she knew how tangled it was for me, but she asked a question that I deflected at the time. If a friend came to you this many times in this short a period, would you still be lending, or would you be noticing a pattern? I said it was different because it was family. She let it go. The business idea came from my parents. My sister had started making candles and wax melts, selling them at local markets, and she had a vision for scaling it up. A small e-commerce operation, better packaging, a proper website. My parents presented it to me at Sunday dinner, like it was obvious. They said she had real talent for it. She just needed some startup capital. They said it was an investment, not a gift. I would get money back when it turned a profit. My dad said, "You've always been the one with the head for money. She needs someone in her corner." I should have heard that sentence differently. What he was actually saying was, "You are the responsible one. That means it's your job to rescue her." Again, I gave her $15,000 over the following 8 months. She did build a website. She did sell candles. The business made, as far as I could ever tell, about $400 before it quietly stopped being mentioned. By this point, my wife and I had been having serious conversations about buying. The market in the Greater Toronto area was brutal. But we'd been disciplined. We'd been looking at places, in Stony Creek, in Grimsby, even considering further out, if we had to. And slowly, quietly, the number we were looking at in our savings account had become a number that made houses feel further away than they should have been. It was my wife who finally sat down and made me look at the actual figure. Not an estimate, not a rough sense, the real number written down, with every transfer I had made to my sister over 3 years listed beside it. $58,400. We sat in silence in our kitchen for a long time. Then she said quietly, "I want you to know that I'm not angry at you. I'm telling you this because I think you needed to see it." I stared at the number. "Did you know it was this much?" she asked. The honest answer was no, not exactly. I had known it was significant. I had not let myself add it up because adding it up would have meant facing something I wasn't ready to face. I called my parents the next morning. I didn't call my sister first. I think some part of me wanted to believe that my parents would be shocked. That they would step in, that they would help fix it. I was still, at 31, hoping my parents would make it right. My dad answered. I told him the number. There was a pause. He said, "Well, some of that was loans she's intending to repay." I said, "She hasn't repaid a single one." He said, "She's going through a hard time." I said, "She's been going through a hard time for 3 years. I'm the one having a hard time now." My mother took the phone. She said they understood. This was frustrating, but that my sister was fragile right now. And confronting her aggressively was not going to help anything. She said my wife was probably stressed about the house. That was understood. We shouldn't let money come between siblings. I said, "Mom, we can't buy a house." There was a silence. Then my mother said, "You're young, you have time." I hung up. I called my sister next. She answered on the third ring. And I could tell immediately that my parents had already spoken to her. Because her voice had that particular quality it got. When she was preparing a defense, I didn't give a speech. I just said, "I need you to tell me honestly whether you intend to pay any of this back." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've been meaning to talk to you about that." She did not talk to me about that. What she did instead was cry. She said she'd been struggling with anxiety, and she'd been trying to get her life together. And she knew she'd put a lot on me, and she felt terrible about it. She said she loved me. She said she didn't know what she would have done without me. She did not mention a number. She did not mention a plan. She did not acknowledge what she had taken. I said, "I can't do this anymore." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I mean I'm done. I'm not giving you any more money. I'm not going to be available for any more emergencies. I need some distance." She started crying harder. She said I was abandoning her. She said she was scared. She said she had no one else. That last part hit differently than she probably intended it to, because it made me realize something. She'd always had someone else. She'd had our parents, who had never once let a consequence land. She'd had me, who had done the same. What she meant was that she had no one else, who would keep absorbing the damage without pushing back. That is not the same thing as having no one. I told her I needed some time. I ended the call. My parents called 3 times that evening. I didn't answer. My wife sat with me on the couch and didn't try to fill the silence. Which was exactly what I needed. We ordered pizza from a place down the street and watched something neither of us remembers. And sometime around 10 o'clock I said, "I think I've been confusing love with obligation my entire life." She put her head on my shoulder. "I know," she said. The weeks that followed were strange. I had expected to feel lighter after setting a boundary. Instead I felt guilty, and also angry at myself for feeling guilty, which is a particularly exhausting combination. My parents called regularly. Not to apologize, to manage. They checked in on my sister and then reported back to me on how she was doing. They told me she was struggling. They told me she was worried about money. They told me she missed me. They did not ask how I was doing once. My mother came to our house one Sunday without calling first. She sat at our kitchen table and she explained, at length, that my sister had not had an easy life, that some people struggled more than others, that the family needed to stick together, and that I was being unfair to her in a vulnerable moment. My wife offered her tea. My mother accepted. My wife went to the kitchen and left me to it. I let my mother talk. When she finished, I said one thing. How much did you and Dad give her over the past 3 years? She paused. That's different. How much? We helped when we could. The point is, I'm not preparing, I said. I'm just asking. How much? She didn't answer. I wasn't surprised. I already knew the answer was far less than what I had given, because I was the one with savings, which is why they had consistently pointed her at me. My mother left an hour later. She hugged me at the door and said she hoped I would come around. I closed the door and stood in the hallway for a while. My wife appeared from the kitchen. She didn't ask how it went, she could tell. You okay? She asked. I'm not sure, I said. She nodded. That's honest. I want to tell you about the months that followed honestly. Which means admitting it wasn't clean or resolved quickly. I pulled back from my family, but not completely at first. I still showed up at my parents' house for dinner occasionally. I responded to texts. I was polite. What I stopped doing was being available. Emotionally, financially, in the middle of the night emergency kind of way that I had trained everyone around me to expect. My sister tested it, of course. She reached out 3 times in the first month. With things that might have been described as emergencies. A scheduling problem with a dental appointment. That somehow became my problem, to solve a question about a government form that she absolutely could have Googled. A long emotional text about a difficult week that ended with a vague mention of being short on groceries. I did not respond to any of them the way I would have 6 months earlier. I replied warmly to the emotional text and did not offer money. I let the others sit. Each time I didn't rush to fix something, I felt guilty. Each time the guilt passed without anything catastrophic happening, I felt slightly more like myself. My wife and I started looking at houses again in the spring. We weren't where we wanted to be, but we were looking. There was a semi-detached in Dundas that we went back to see twice. We didn't make an offer. But, standing in the backyard on a cold March afternoon, I felt something shift. My parents found out we were house hunting. My mother called to ask how it was going, and whether we had considered getting a financial gift from family to help with the down payment. She mentioned her and my dad. She mentioned, casually, that they had helped my sister with some things over the years, and it was only fair. I said nothing for a long moment. Then I said, I think we're okay on our own, Mom. She seemed surprised. I'm not sure why. I hung up gently and went back to my wife, who was at the kitchen table looking at listings, and I sat down beside her. Your mom? She asked without looking up. Yeah. She didn't ask what we talked about. She just pointed at a listing in Waterdown and said, what do you think? I looked at it. Maybe, I said. Things got quieter after that. My sister stopped reaching out as often, which I think was a combination of pulling back and finding other people to lean on. My parents were polite and slightly distant in a way that told me they were still hurt by what they saw as my withdrawal from the family. I understood that. I also understood that their hurt was not the same thing as them being right. Almost a year after the kitchen table conversation with my wife, I got a text from my sister. It was long. She had clearly spent time writing it. She said she had been in therapy for a few months. She said she had started to understand some patterns that she hadn't seen clearly before. She said she knew she had put a lot on me, and that it hadn't been fair. She said she wasn't asking for anything. Not forgiveness, not contact, not money. She just wanted me to know that she was starting to understand it. I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone down and made coffee and stood at the window looking at the street for a while. My wife asked what was going on. I showed her the text. She read it and handed the phone back. How do you feel? I don't know yet, I said. She nodded. You don't have to know yet. I didn't respond to my sister for 2 weeks. Not because I was punishing her, but because I genuinely didn't know what to say. I wanted to believe the text. I also knew that wanting to believe something is not the same as it being true. And I had spent years confusing those two things. When I finally responded, I kept it short. I said I appreciated her saying it. I said I wasn't ready to talk more than that right now, but I was glad she was getting support. I said I hoped things kept getting better for her. Wrote back within an hour. She said thank you. She didn't push. That mattered. I won't tell you that everything was fine after that, because it wasn't. My parents took a long time to stop framing my limits as selfishness. There was a Christmas dinner where my uncle, a man I'd always been fond of, pulled me aside and told me that family is all you have in the end, and that I should think about whether I was going to regret this. I told him I appreciated his concern and changed the subject. The old version of me would have apologized. The version of me at that table just moved on. My sister and I have texted a handful of times. We are not close. I don't know if we will ever be close. She has a job now, a real one, with a pension and everything, which I heard from my parents with a particular note in their voice that was meant to make me feel like things had worked out fine. Maybe they had. For her. I hope they had. My wife and I bought a house last fall. It's a semi-detached in Burlington, not huge, not fancy, with a backyard that needs work and a second bedroom we have plans for. The day we got the keys, we drove there after work with one bottle of good wine, and sat on the back step because we didn't have outdoor furniture yet, and we drank out of plastic cups and watched the light change. She said, "We did this." I nodded. We did. I thought about my sister. I thought about my parents. I thought about all the ways I'd been taught that being responsible meant having no limits. That love was measured by how much you'd take without complaint. I thought about how long it had taken me to understand that you can love someone and still hold them accountable. You can love your family and still refuse to disappear into it. My mother came to see the house 2 weeks after we moved in. She brought flowers and a casserole, and she stood in the kitchen looking around with an expression I couldn't quite read. She said it was lovely. She said we'd done well. Then she said quietly, "I hope you know we're proud of you." I looked at her for a moment. I wanted to say something true, not mean, not closed, but honest. "I know you are," I said. "I think you've always been proud of me. I just needed you to be on my side." She looked at me. Her eyes filled. She didn't say anything. I handed her a dish towel so she'd have something to do with her hands. And I told her the casserole smelled good. We moved to the kitchen table. We had a normal evening. The most normal one we'd had in years. It wasn't healed. I'm so not sure that word applies to some things. But it was honest. Which felt like more than I'd had for a long time. My sister hasn't asked me for money since the text she sent a year ago. Whether that's because she's changed or because she understands now that I won't give it, I can't say. Maybe it's both. Probably it's both. What I can say is this. I spent a long time believing that being the dependable one was a virtue I'd developed. It wasn't. It was a role I'd been assigned, before I was old enough to choose, reinforced every time I held a line, and every time I didn't. I was the one with the capacity to absorb, so I became the one expected to absorb. And I called that love because I didn't have another word for it yet. I have a different word for it now. I have a few actually. I know what it cost me. The money, yes, but also the years of swallowing things. The exhaustion of being reliable on someone else's terms. The slow erosion of a marriage that could have buckled under the weight of all of it if my wife had been a different person. And I know what it cost my sister. Even if she's still figuring that out. Growing up in a family where someone always caught her meant she never fully learned to catch herself. If you're listening to this, and you recognize something in it, the pattern of the one who gives and the one who takes. The parents who love both children, but protect one from consequences. I want to say something that I needed to hear. And no one said clearly enough until I was well into the damage. Being the strong one doesn't mean you have to be the unlimited one. Responsibility is not the same thing as availability. And you can love your family with your whole heart, while still having the right to say, not like this, not anymore. I almost told my sister to just grow up, to figure it out, to stop making herself my emergency. Instead, I stepped back and let her learn what I had learned a long time ago. That some lessons only come when there's no one left to soften them. It took her a while. Maybe it's still taking her. But the last time we texted, she mentioned she'd saved enough to cover 3 months of expenses. She said it like it was something she was proud of, this ordinary adult thing. I wrote back and told her that was great. I meant it.